Tonight, we are going to stay in one room. Not a laboratory, not a workshop, not a factory floor. The kitchen. The room you have already been in today, probably more than once, without looking at anything in it. Every object in there arrived by a longer road than you would guess. The fork was treated as an insult. The tin can existed for almost 50 years before anybody made a sensible way to open one. Salt would not come out of the shaker. Sliced bread was banned by a government. Tupperware failed so completely in shops that it was pulled off the shelves altogether. None of these were bad ideas. They were all correct. They simply did not work at first, or nobody wanted them, or the thing that made them useful had not been invented yet. 14 of them tonight, in order, from 1004 to 1965. There is no rush in any of this, and nothing in it needs your full attention. If you are here to fall asleep, that is exactly what this is for. We begin at a wedding in Venice, 1,000 years ago. The fork was treated as an insult. Around the year 1004, a Byzantine princess named Maria Argyropolina came to Venice to marry the son of the Doge. She brought her own habits with her. At the wedding feast, she did not eat with her hands, as everyone else in the room did. She had a small golden instrument with 2 prongs, and she used it to lift food to her mouth. This caused offense. Not mild offense. As the story was written down later by a churchman named Peter Damian, she was accused of vanity and of refusing the food God had given her in the way God intended it to be taken, which was with the fingers. Maria died a few years afterwards of plague. Damian, writing decades after the fact, presented her death as a judgment on her pride. That account is the reason we still know about the dinner at all, and it is worth saying plainly that he was writing to make a moral point, not to record a meal. The fork took a long time to recover. It spread through Italy over the next 500 years, mostly because pasta is genuinely difficult to eat with the hands. It reached England around 1611, when a traveler named Thomas Coriat brought one back and was laughed at for it. By the 1700s, it was ordinary across Europe. There is one in every drawer in your kitchen now, and using your fingers instead is the thing that would be remarked on. The pressure cooker is older than the steam engine. In 1679, a French physicist named Denis Papin showed the Royal Society in London a sealed iron vessel he called a digester. The idea was simple and slightly grim. Seal water in a strong pot, heat it, and the water cannot boil away. The pressure rises, the temperature rises past the normal boiling point, and things that would otherwise take days to soften give way in an hour. Papin was interested in bones. He wanted to get food value out of material that was ordinarily thrown away. The digester worked. It also exploded, more than once. Papin's response to that is the part that matters. He fitted a lever with a sliding weight on top of the vessel, so that when the pressure inside passed a set point, the lever lifted and let steam out by itself. That is the safety valve, and it is the reason the pressure cooker is on this list. Papin had just made a device that turned heat into a measured, controlled push. He spent the following years thinking about what else that push could do, sketched a piston driven by steam, and handed the whole line of thought to the people who built engines. He never made money from any of it. He died poor, and it is not certain where he is buried. The kitchen version took another 260 years. A sealed home cooker went on sale in America in the late 1930s, and it still has Papin's weight sitting on top of the lid, hissing when the pressure gets high. The tin can came before the can opener. In 1810, a British merchant named Peter Durand took out a patent for preserving food in sealed vessels of tin-plated iron. The method underneath it belonged to a French confectioner, Nicolas Appert, who had worked out that food sealed in glass and heated would keep. Glass breaks, iron does not, and iron went to sea. By 1813, there was a factory in London supplying the Royal Navy. The cans worked exactly as promised. Food inside them stayed edible for years, and some of it stayed edible for a great deal longer than that. There was one problem, and it lasted almost half a century. Nobody had made a tool for opening them. The early cans were heavy, with walls thick enough that a knife was useless. Instructions printed on the side told the buyer to cut round the top, near the outer edge, with a chisel and a hammer. That was the official method. For 48 years, opening tinned food meant finding a chisel. The first proper can opener was patented in America in 1858, a lever with a curved blade that you drove into the lid and dragged around. The rotating wheel that everybody uses now came later still, and the version in your drawer took its final shape in the 1920s. The can was solved first. The opening of it was an afterthought for 2 generations. Foil was once worth more than silver. Aluminium is the most common metal in the crust of this planet. For most of human history, nobody had ever seen any. It does not occur as metal. It is locked into rock, held tightly, and getting it out takes electricity or something equally violent. A Danish physicist named Hans Christian Ørsted produced the first impure sample in 1825. For decades afterwards, it was a laboratory curiosity, made in grams. Because it was rare, it was treated as precious. Napoleon III of France is said to have kept a set of aluminium cutlery for his most honored guests, while everybody else at the table made do with gold. When the Washington Monument was finished in 1884, the builders capped it with a small pyramid of aluminium, about the size of a fist, and it cost roughly what a skilled worker earned in a month. Then in 1886, 2 people, working separately and both aged 22, found the same electrical process for pulling aluminium out of its ore. The price collapsed. Within a few years, the precious metal was cheap enough for pots. Rolling it into a sheet thin enough to tear with your fingers came in 1910 in Switzerland. The first thing wrapped in it was chocolate. The box in your kitchen drawer holds several ounces of a substance that once sat on top of a national monument to show off. The dishwasher was built to save the china. Josephine Cochran lived in Shelbyville, Illinois, and gave a great many dinner parties. The story she told about the invention is not about tired hands. It is about her plates. She had inherited good china, and her servants kept chipping it in the sink. She wanted the washing done in a way that did not involve anybody handling the pieces. She measured her crockery. She made wire compartments shaped to fit each item, plates in one, cups in another, and set them on a wheel inside a copper boiler. A motor turned the wheel while hot soapy water was pumped up from the bottom. Nothing rubbed against anything. The water did the work. She patented it in 1886 and showed it at the Chicago World's Fair in 1893, where it won the top award in its class. Then it sat there. Households did not buy it. Most homes did not have hot water on demand. The machine was large, and where there were servants, washing up was already someone's job and cost nothing extra. What it did sell to was hotels and restaurants, which had mountains of dishes and a reason to count the hours. Cochran's company supplied them for the rest of her life. She died in 1913. The domestic machine, the one under your counter, only became normal in the 1950s, when hot water and detergent and the shape of the working day had all changed. Her wire baskets are still in there, more or less unaltered. The thermos made nothing for the man who made it. James Dewar was a Scottish chemist who worked with things that were extremely cold, liquefied gases, held at temperatures far below anything in the natural world. His problem was keeping them. Cold leaks in as surely as heat leaks out, and the moment his liquid oxygen warmed up, it was gone. So in 1892, he built a glass vessel with two walls and pumped the air out from between them. With no air in the gap, there is almost nothing left to carry heat across it. He silvered the surfaces to turn back the radiation as well. The result held its contents at temperature for hours, and it made a whole field of low-temperature physics practical. Dewar did not patent it. By his own account, the flask was a piece of scientific apparatus and belonged to anyone who needed one. In 1903, a German glassblower named Reinhold Berger, who had made flasks for Dewar's laboratory, saw a use outside physics. He made a sturdier version in a metal case, held a public competition to name it, and paid out for the word thermos. It sold enormously. Dewar took the matter to court and lost. The invention was already published and freely given. The flask in your cupboard is his design, essentially unchanged in more than a century. Two walls, silvered, with nothing in between. The coffee filter was a page from a schoolbook. Melita Bentz was a housewife in Dresden, and she disliked the coffee. At the time, you made it by boiling the grounds, or by tying them in a cloth bag that had to be washed and never quite came clean, or by letting them settle and accepting that the last mouthful was silt. All three options produced something bitter, and the cloth in particular held the flavor of every pot before it. In 1908, she took a brass pot, knocked holes in the bottom of it with a nail, and looked for something to lay inside. What she used was a sheet of blotting paper torn out of her son Willie's school exercise book. She poured the water through. The paper held back the grounds and the oils that carry the bitterness, and what came out was clear. She registered a patent that summer and a business that December, with a starting capital of 73 pennigs and 2 employees, who were her sons. The company still exists and is still owned by the family. The cone shape and the ridges came later, in the 1930s, to slow the water down. If you use a paper filter or a machine that holds one, you are using a piece of a 1908 exercise book. Salt would not come out of the shaker. Salt takes water out of the air. That is what it is for in preserving food, and it is a nuisance everywhere else. In a damp kitchen, or in damp weather, salt in a shaker draws in moisture, dissolves very slightly at the surface, and then dries again into a solid mass. For most of history, this was simply how salt behaved. Households kept it in a dish and broke it up with a spoon, or dried it by the fire, or put a few grains of rice in the container to take up the moisture first. In 1911, an American salt company began adding a small amount of magnesium carbonate to its product. The additive coats the crystals and keeps them from taking on water and locking together. 3 years later, they advertised it, with a picture of a girl walking in the rain with an umbrella, spilling salt from a tilted package behind her, and a line saying that when it rains, it pours. The point of the slogan was literal. The salt poured in the rain, and other salt did not. The additive has changed since. Most table salt now uses a silicate rather than magnesium carbonate, and iodine was added on top of that in the 1920s for reasons of health rather than flow. The shaker on your table works because of a decision made about damp weather just over 100 years ago. The egg box settled an argument. In 1911, in the town of Smithers in British Columbia, a hotel owner and a local farmer were arguing. The farmer delivered eggs by cart over rough roads. A certain number arrived broken. The hotel owner did not want to pay for broken eggs. The farmer did not accept that the breakage was his fault. This had been going on for some time. A man named Joseph Coyle, who published the local newspaper, heard the argument and thought about it. He had paper and he had a press. What he made was a sheet of card, cut and folded so that it stood up into a grid of separate cells, each one shaped to hold a single egg and to keep it from touching its neighbors or the wall of the box. Then he built a machine to cut and fold the card in quantity. It worked because it does not try to be strong. The card gives way, absorbs the knock, and springs back. An egg is a very good structure under even pressure, and a very poor one under a point of impact, and the cells make sure the pressure stays even. The molded pulp version, the gray one, came in the 1930s, made from waste paper. The argument between the hotel and the farmer was solved. The design of the solution has barely moved in 114 years, and one is probably in your fridge. The toaster came before sliced bread. Electric toasters existed before the First World War. They were simple things, an exposed wire element in a frame, and they had one serious flaw. Somebody had to stand there, watch, and turn the bread over at the right moment. Charles Strite was a mechanic in Stillwater, Minnesota, and he ate in the company canteen. The toast there was regularly burnt because the person minding it was busy with other work. His answer, patented in 1919, put the decision inside the machine. A clockwork timer, a spring, and a latch. You push the bread down, the element runs for a set time, and then the latch releases, and the toast comes up on its own. Nobody has to be paying attention, which is the entire point. The first models went to restaurants. A domestic version arrived in 1926 under the name Toastmaster. Here is the part that is easy to get the wrong way round. Bread did not come sliced. When the pop-up toaster reached kitchens, the buyer cut their own slices with a knife, and the slices were uneven, and one edge would be too thick to fit the slot. Commercially sliced bread only went on sale in 1928, 9 years after Strite's patent. The machine came first, and the bread was changed to suit it. The fridge used to kill people. The first domestic refrigerators arrived in the 19-teens and 20s, and they worked by moving a gas round a loop, compressing it and letting it expand, exactly as your fridge does now. The difference was the gas. The choices available were ammonia, methyl chloride, and sulfur dioxide. All three do the job. All three are also poisonous, and 2 of them are hard to smell in small amounts. Seals leaked. In a closed house at night, a leak from the machine in the kitchen could kill the people asleep upstairs. There were deaths, they were reported, and by the mid-1920s a refrigerator was a thing some families kept outside on a porch on purpose. In 1926, 2 physicists, Albert Einstein and Leo Szilard, patented a refrigerator designed around the problem. It had no moving parts at all, and therefore nothing that could wear out and leak. The design worked, but was never widely built. What went into houses instead was a different answer. From 1928, a new family of gases made to be harmless. They were not poisonous, not flammable, and the chemist who introduced them demonstrated the fact by breathing one in and blowing out a candle with it. They were exactly as safe indoors as promised. What they did to the upper atmosphere took another 50 years to notice, and they have since been replaced again. Sliced bread was banned. Otto Rohwedder spent 16 years on the problem. Bread that is sliced by machine goes stale quickly and falls apart in the wrapper, and his answer was to slice and wrap in one continuous motion. His machine went into a bakery in Missouri in 1928. Within 5 years, most bread sold in America was sliced, which is a very fast change for a food that old. Then, on the 18th of January 1943, in the middle of the war, the United States banned the sale of sliced bread. The reasons given were practical. Sliced bread needs a heavier wax paper wrapper to stay fresh, and paper was in short supply. The slicing machines used steel and were meant to be replaced with parts that were needed elsewhere. There was also a hope of holding down the price of flour. The ban was unpopular immediately, and in a way that surprised the people who made it. Households had forgotten how to get an even slice. Bakeries had thrown out their knives. Letters were written to newspapers. It lasted less than 2 months. The order was withdrawn on the 8th of March 1943, and the official statement admitted the savings had turned out to be smaller than expected. The phrase about the best thing since sliced bread dates from that period. It was funny at the time because people had just found out what life without it was like. Tupperware failed in every shop. Earl Tupper had a material and a shape and no customers. The material was polyethylene, a soft, slightly waxy plastic that was left over from wartime production and considered close to worthless. Tupper worked out how to purify and mold it into something firm, light, and not brittle. The shape was the lid. He took the idea from the lip of a paint tin, turned it inside out, and made a seal you press down and then push the air out of, so that the atmosphere itself holds it closed. Food kept in it did not dry out. The bowls went into shops in 1946 and did not sell. The reason was simple, and nobody had foreseen it. A customer picked one up, could not work out what the lid was for, could not close it, and put it down again. It needed to be demonstrated, and a shelf cannot demonstrate anything. A saleswoman named Brownie Wise had already noticed this. She was selling large quantities of the same bowls in people's houses, at gatherings where somebody stood there and showed you the seal, and burped it, and turned the bowl upside down. In 1951, Tupper hired her and withdrew the entire product line from shops. From then on, the only way to buy it was from a person who had shown you how it worked. The plastic bag was invented to save trees. In 1965, a Swedish engineer named Sten Gustaf Thulin patented a bag made from a single tube of thin polyethylene, flattened, welded across the bottom, with the handles cut out of the top. The clever part is that it is one piece. There are no seams to fail, and the material is strong enough that very little of it is needed. A shopping bag of this design weighs a few grams and will carry several kilograms. What it replaced was paper. Paper bags are made from trees. They are heavy, and they need a great deal of energy and water to produce. Thulin's son has said that his father saw the plastic bag as the environmentally sensible choice, and that in the family they were folded up and kept and used again and again for years, because that is obviously what you would do with something so durable. The company that owned the patent supplied most of Europe. By the end of the 1970s, the plastic bag had taken the market from paper almost completely. The thing nobody planned for was that they would be given away free, one per purchase, and thrown out the same afternoon. A bag built to last for years is used for 20 minutes. There is a roll of them somewhere in your kitchen right now, probably stuffed inside another one. That is 14 of them. The pattern in this episode is a little different from the ones before it. These were not accidents, and they were not things built for the wrong job. Every one of them was correct on the day it was made. What was missing was everything around it. The tin can needed an opener that did not exist. The dishwasher needed hot water in ordinary houses. The pop-up toaster needed bread cut to a standard thickness. Tupperware needed somebody standing in the room to show you the lid. Aluminum needed cheap electricity before it could be anything but a treasure. An invention on its own is only half of the thing. The other half is the world it lands in. And that half usually arrives late. If you are still awake, the room is full of them. Every object in there won an argument that took decades, and none of them look like they ever had one. Sleep well.